That was extremely smooth. Oh, we'll just add him in. Anton, welcome.
It was perfectly tuned.
It's a well-oiled machine.
Extremely on cue.
It was perfect.
All right,
I was
welcome.
like coming down, just killed it. Just killing it.
Yes. St. Patrick's Day. Give everybody a minute to join up. People are flooding in. It's great.
Thousands.
Nervous
now. Oh my god.
And that's like, I made a mistake.
Yeah. Thought these guys were low budget.
Low budget, but high impact. That's right.
Yes. Oh. All right. Well, we'll kick it off. So, yeah, welcome to Atomics on a Friday. I have a short list of quick updates or notes or something at the beginning. First, I think the most important thing is to share that we are over 100 subscribers now. So we absolutely appreciate all the support from the community. Everything we're doing here is just to bring the best tactical, actionable content. So we thank you guys for listening in and joining up. This week's obviously Anton's here. Next week will be Nasruddin. And then make sure you like and subscribe. And the YouTube video will be up after. Go from there. Awesome. We will ship it.
Ship it.
Buttons.
Too many.
One day we'll have someone like professionally button click things for us.
I feel like we should get that
Cool.
once you hit 100 subscribers. Like that should just be like, if you don't have one, did you really make it?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. The real marketing budget kicks in.
All 7 cents from the ad revenue we got now.
Yes. That's awesome.
Let's go in.
All right. Clicking more buttons. Okay, so who we are. Let's go from the top. My name is Michael Haig. I'm a threat researcher at Splunk. And, Paul and I put Atomics on a Friday together to bring the community together to ship Atomics downrange. And Paul, you want to run?
Yeah, I'm Paul. I am a principal threat hunter, as well as co-maintainer of Atomics on a Friday with Mike. I don't know. I never do this right. I feel like everybody just pretty much knows at this point because like everybody tunes in. But yeah, super excited. But very excited for our special guest today. This whole series has been awesome so far. So really excited to keep it going. So Anton, thanks again for joining us. You just give us a little bit about yourself, which will probably be better than how Mike and I introduced ourselves.
I don't know about that. We'll see. My name's Anton Ovrutsky. Anton loves D&B on Twitter. I'm a team lead for the threat research team at Sumo Logic. Happy to be here. I think we're going to jam out to some purple team stuff today, which is a topic that's close to my heart. So yeah, really excited.
Right. And can't forget Goots. So we'll be doing
That's the VIP right there.
It's the real one.
Yeah.
Large. I should probably put in the reference again. There's the stream. Oh, accidentally just moved it. There we go. All right, so what are we even doing here?
I think everyone's asking themselves that question, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I was just trying to push more buttons on the back end here. All right, I'm ready. Let's do this. The Goots.
Right on. So for those of you just joining us or maybe you're recapping this, we kicked off our March Madness series, kind of bridging the gap of taking a threat report and trying to go from reading it to making it actionable. So we started off with our awesome panel of guests for this month. And then last week we had Harrison on, where he provided our insights onto the cyber threat intelligence world and how we should read this, some of the things that we should probably avoid. kind of his approach to how he takes a threat report and then goes to stripping out and mapping TTPs, figuring out where some of the gaps are. And so today we're going to take those TTPs. We're going to then map them out, figure out some appropriate tests, whether they're procedurally one-for-one or things that from a technique standpoint are very close, that we can use to gauge the efficacy of our data sources, our analytics, in order for detection. So we can jump into that. And then next week, after we send these tests down range, we'll actually be looking at making sure that we have the right data sources and then going in to actually kind of figuring out how we should build detections for it. So kind of wrap up the whole series. So really excited to jump in today. And I know Anton did some really cool magic on the back end, which I'm really excited to dig into. And then we'll have some resources at the end to share out so everybody can go and take this and send stuff down range. So I think we're ready to get into it.
Excellent. I will drop the. Oh, you already dropped the Mandiant link, so that makes that easy.
It's in there. Let's go.
Cool. All right. Next button. Kind of did this, right? Or do we want to run through it one more time?
Yeah, that's probably like the nice bullet point list that I tried to go off of, but just kind of hit it from the head. But yeah, so last week we did the cyber threat intelligence aspect.
Yeah.
So today we'll be digging into the purple teaming, and then next week we'll actually look into figuring out how to do detection engineering. So really excited for that. But let's get into it.
Yes.
I think we're at the point where everybody's like, now what? Again, please don't sue us. It's like the third time, but just waiting for that cease and desist to come into the mail any day now. It's coming. Goot loader has been our theme. The Goots. Not to be confused with Goot kit, which is completely different than Goot loader.
So I'll ask one question. Before Goot loader and all of this came up in the news recently and whatnot, have either of you heard of it or had dug into it before?
I think I first heard of it when I saw the DeFi report. I think is when I first saw it. But I usually have a different point of view on these things than folks like Harrison would, where the names of this stuff doesn't stick with me usually. I'm usually I think like Mike, you mentioned like last week, you just like wrote through the report and you want to know like the like the command lines and all that juicy data. Like that's how I look at that mostly. But for some names like Goot loader, they kind of like stick out in your head a little bit. So I think that's how I remembered it. But I think for me, I look at it more of like what's the initial access vector, like the SEO poisoning is interesting, and like the actual like TTPs, especially at the procedural level, is what like I'm most focusing on, because I gave up on trying to like categorize all this stuff and remember the names and all the groups and UNCs and APTs. I can see why threat intel is like a separate-ish profession within our circle, right? Because that's a lot of work.
Yeah. We determined there were kind of three modes of people who read reports, which is Harrison, who reads word for word, make sure commas and periods are in the right spot. Mike is smash and grab, along with Anton. And Paul just likes to read the headlines, the bylines, and then usually forgets what he was doing and goes on to something else. So those are generally the three ways that you can action a threat report off of that.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
And then you get your updates from me when I'm like, hey, Paul, did you see this?
Yeah, I usually just wait for Mike to give me the juicy tidbits. Like it's kind of like the really short abridged version. Like just give it that like 20 minutes, and I'm usually getting some really good stuff.
Yeah,
I like to read the IDA screenshots. Sometimes, yeah, those are fun to look at.
The IDA screenshots are actually kind of an important aspect for an Intel blog, because like if you don't have one, is it really research? I don't know. Like if you don't see all your moves and pops, can't make a good decision on how you're going to respond to this. I'm just saying. So, all right. I think I know who this one is, but yes. Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, I think kind of the same for me, honestly. Like I smash and grab probably through all of these things and never really went back and and categorized by name and threw it in a spreadsheet and analyzed it or anything like that. I actually thought about it. I think it was this morning. If you follow me on Twitter and you see copy and paste text from a blog, it's because I actually went back and read it, and I'm like, this is interesting, and I'll ship that because I'm like, now I'm actually like reading the blog and going in a little bit more detail. But yeah, that's my CTI Hague for the moment.
Yeah, sometimes I'll see someone post like something super interesting from a report, and I'll think like, I remember looking at this report, but I didn't see that part, and then I have to like go back and like reread it and actually reread it, and then every time I'm like, damn, I should have done that in the first place. But the cycle continues. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
Everybody's here studying up on, new and emerging threats, and I'm trying to track down what is the most apex wildcat in the kingdom. Which one's the best threat hunter out of all of them?
The house cat has to be the house cat. Yeah.
It's the black-footed cat. It's like 9 pounds, even smaller than the house cat.
Yeah. The little kitties are crazy. Yeah.
60% success rate, 14 to 15 takedowns in a night. It's 1 an hour at this point. That's wild.
Yeah.
Tigers aren't even doing that. They're doing that like once every 7 days. Let's go. All right. Random side tangent.
So then I guess I know that it's actually interesting, but yeah, we got to keep it on the purple teaming here. The next question is from your perspective, and I guess this is for all of us. When you're developing or when you're reading a report like this Gootloader one from Mandiant, how are you outside of like the smash and grab and things like that? Like, so you got those pieces pulled out. Kind of like, what's your next step? Like, what do you do, Anton, Paul, Mike? What do you do? Kind of from there. Is it just leave that from there? Go from there. What's the next purple teaming part? Getting close to purple teaming part.
I think it probably depends on like what your role is at the time, I guess, so to speak. So if like before I joined Sumo, I did purple teaming as a consultant, and when I read these reports as a consultant, I would think like, hey, this client might be a good fit for this particular test case or TTP, or maybe this other client I knew didn't have the logs, and that would be like another interesting use case kind of thing. I think that perspective like shifts a little bit when you work at a vendor, and it becomes like, do we have coverage for this? Is it good coverage? Are we like spamming our customers with alerts? Are we like nailing down what we need to nail down kind of thing? So I guess it all depends on like what your perspective on purple teaming is, and if you're doing it as like an individual contributor for your organization or something like that, you'd probably be looking at the report thinking almost the same as a consultant, but in terms of like your own workplace, like, do we have coverage for this? What do we need? If we don't have coverage for it, what do we need to get that coverage kind of thing? That's usually where my head's at with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't really have it like a variance of that. Like it's kind of the same thought process, right? Like, how would I try and emulate like procedurally something if it's close to it, if it's unique enough that would make it interesting, versus, okay, this is a technique and this is a variation of a technique. Is that covered under something that, because do I want to spend the time making an analytic or something to detect every single instance, or is there something that I can make broad enough that's going to generically cover a technique in some capacity? And you go on Twitter, there's always the great debate in like the detection engineering aspect of it, of like where and how and like what level. But I think as long as you have something that can give you some signal in the entire thing, that's an improvement, right? Because every step they do, that's an opportunity for detection to determine where it is. Now, the further left you go, the further right you go, then it becomes like more critical to detect it, because then you're getting to that impact side. So the closer we can get and the more opportunities up front we can do it earlier on, then the less chance we have of potentially having a larger incident or breach potentially, right? So that's the way I think about it. And of course, like sitting in sitting in the vendor space as well, like it's kind of interesting of like how to think about that versus in the traditional aspect. Anton, you pointed out like in a specific organization where a lot of things are more static, like I can do a lot more baselining across because that organization, like I have more knowledge and in depth versus potentially like sometimes like going into like specific instances or customer environments, and then like at a larger scale, like multiple. So kind of like one perspective of procedural versus technique, and where that balance is.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do we? I don't know if we have it on our list today, but maybe it's like a good thing to cover, like what purple teaming is, kind of, and how we like think about it, because I know the terminology in InfoSec is probably like all over the place, and people might have a different idea of what.
Sounds
what
like a good thing to cover.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It might be. Yeah.
No better time.
Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess like I'll kick it off. I think like I said, people have different definitions of it, and I think from my perspective, it's like a mix of like the red side where you're attacking and the blue where you're defending, but it's like a more of like a collaborative exercise where things aren't really kept under wraps. You typically in a purple team, you usually like do the execution and then check with whoever is on the other side of the console or whatever. Like, did you see it? And if not, let's run it again. Let's try different variations. I think that like a lot of things in InfoSec, there's a lot of like mystique around it. Like at what point do you become a red teamer? Like does someone give you like a badge that you're a red teamer? And I think it's the same for purple and blue and all that. So I think like, if you're running random TTPs at your workplace and just seeing how they react, like congratulations, you're doing a purple team, right? There's different like viewpoints and perspectives for it. You can do purple team professionally for clients. You can do it at an organization. So I think it's more about like that like try and see what you get aspect, playing around with your tools kind of thing, versus like a rigid framework where if you're not executing this particular thing, you're not a purple teamer. If you're not doing it this particular way, you're not a purple teamer. I think as long as you're bringing value to your organization or your client or your customers or whatever, then you're doing purple teaming. That's good for you. But that's my viewpoint on it. Maybe you guys have different ones.
Is there a because I've seen it kind of go two different ways, and so is there? And I'm asking kind of naively, but is there a purple teaming framework out there that people could start with? Do you know? I don't know.
Yeah, and I know like the Res had one, and I know that like that very old. I don't want to say old. No offense to Nickerson and Gates, but they did a talk. I believe it was at Troopers. I could be wrong on that, but I think it was called like Purple Teaming the Kill Chain or something like that, where I believe that was one of the earliest kind of like articulations of purple teaming, and especially the like tracking around it. I think that was the like magic sauce of that talk. And I know Skeeth has some materials on purple teaming frameworks as well. My suggestion, and take it or leave it, would be like look at those after you kind of start your exercises, because I ran into a lot of cases, when I was doing purple teaming as a consultant, that clients would tell me like, oh, we want to do it, but we don't have like X or Y in place, or we don't have like this framework, or we're stuck on like the process. Like, I don't know. I'm more of like a rubber hits the road kind of person. I would rather see like something get done before you wrap it around process and framework and slow yourself down and all that. So all that's out there. It's valuable. It's awesome. There's probably like white papers on it too. I remember seeing on purple teaming, but yeah, I would start on your own, kind of like slowly and work your way up to the more official frameworks, because there's no like purple teaming police out there, right? Like no one's gonna like come to your workplace or your shop and say like, hey, you're not doing this purple teaming properly, right? Like as long as you're having value, you're not like breaking your networks or your client networks and stuff like that. Like a successful purple team in my books.
Yeah, because I've definitely seen like probably the more operationalized version of it, where it's like you mentioned, where it's very like red and blue coming together and in kind of like step by step, like here's initial access. We ship the doc, we caught it, okay, did you see this, call back? Yep, saw the call back. All right, excellent. Let's move to the next stage. And then maybe there's a point where it's like, we didn't see that because we didn't have a proxy, or there was something or it was an application that doesn't actually log that. And then it's kind of like, there's like this gap piece that's in there too. But then I could see how it can be. I think you kind of mentioned it a minute ago too, about how like, you're a red teamer. Like, when do you put your red teamer hat on? But it's like a small org, you got a red team hat, and then you got your little blue team hat, and you're like, put both on, and now you're purple teaming.
Exactly,
and it's
right?
like, I'm just trying to make content better. I just want to detect the threat, and or detect these TTPs or procedures from Gootloader or whatnot. Like, it's like, just gonna put these on and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I see a lot on like Twitter and stuff that people think it's all about like the EDR testing portion of it, and seeing how the EDR products, and that's a big part of it for sure. EDR is like a big piece of the puzzle, but in a lot of cases, at least from my experience doing purple teams, the issues were like EDR was definitely an issue, right? It missed some things, or a system didn't have it or whatever, but there was so many cases where it's more like the infrastructure side, like the server's not behaving like the rest of the servers, or like the firewall is not blocking the port from the specific subnet like it's supposed to. And that's the magic of purple teaming in my books, is that you could test like all your tools end to end. Because like when you think about it, and you think about all the like steps that are necessary for a similar to trigger successfully, like there's a lot involved, right? Like the log has to get generated, the right tool has to get it, it has to be parsed, it has to be sent, it has to, the alerting logic itself has to work. So there's so many steps involved in all that, and purple teaming is really great at testing them in kind of like one shot, and in a like a collaborative way. So that's don't think of it as like only testing your EDR. It's testing all the little components that support your network all together.
Yep. And so I guess previously, did you run into a lot of shops where they were like pretty formatted and ready to go for purple team exercises? Or was it kind of like you had to bring everything to the table and really run the show?
It probably depends on the clients, right? Like some are more mature, some were less mature. In the consulting space, a lot of that usually takes place at the statement of work phase, where you have your kickoff or whatever with the client. And the purple team engagement itself could be different things to different clients. It could be, some might want more defensive stuff, they want work on queries, some want just EDR testing, some want like a certain APT replicated. It all depends. But yeah, as a consultancy, you usually like take the lead on that kind of stuff, and like run the show, so to speak, which is hard to do if you've ever done it. So shout out to all the purple team consultants out there hustling.
It's kind of an interesting point. Like, how does an org go from in the maturity level where you may have security tools or things in place that may not all just be piping into a SIM, but you need to make that transition from just going from like, okay, we have a really good vuln management assessment platform. Now we're kind of bridging the gap. We're not necessarily ready for, excuse me, a red team, but we need to figure out like, are our tools working? So have you come across where you have those orgs that may not be centralizing everything, but they have the tools and the capacity to do some of those things in those, but not just in a centralized manner? Like, did that come up in your cases?
Yeah, it came up quite a bit of times too, and it's a good way to like a third party report is a good way to kind of get what you want in an organization. So some clients would have engagements where they know they have certain gaps, and they just wanted them highlighted and articulated, and have the risk written formally, so it could go up the chain, and the decision can be made to invest in certain areas where the gaps were found, right? It's a weird dynamic where, like, because I've experienced it myself, where I could say something till my face is blue, but until like a third party auditor says it, it doesn't get the same traction. So it's I don't know, like a weird byproduct of our I don't know what to call it, our organizations, our businesses, and all that. But yeah, there's definitely been cases like that where you can use the purple team like tactfully to maybe highlight areas that you might know are weak, but you need like someone to champion it and someone to like articulate it in a more formal way for sure.
And Mauricio brought up a good point about purple teaming, is that it's sometimes more typically seen as like improving detection and visibility, which is not necessarily bad. But is there also sometimes a focus on validating the prevention capabilities, whether it's configurations of the firewall, GPOs, tooling, etc., to where it's, I expect this to be blocking X. Does it actually block X? Right? Like, how often did you have a focus on prevention, not just detection, or even just coupling the two together?
Yeah, quite a bit. A good example is like this new Outlook vulnerability with the hash leaking. That was one of my favorite things to try. Not the Outlook in particular, but just like a file with a UNC path, just to test if the firewall would send something out on 445. And I would always ask ahead of time, like, should this work? And 100% of the time it was no, it shouldn't. But that 100% didn't match. You know what I mean? Like it worked more, or I should say, it worked less than 100% or whatever. I probably get my words mixed up, but it worked more often than it should. Is the point. So that happened a lot, and that's what I mean. Like usually, like sometimes it's the security team that cares and feeds for the firewall, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a different team. And that's one of the other benefits of purple teaming, is that it kind of like brings everyone together. And in a lot of cases, like the Active Directory admins would hop on the call, or the firewall admins would hop on the call, and we would like do the thing, and they would see for themselves what the outcome is and what the risk is. And it's, you know, you could like explain like, hey, your hash leaks, and you kind of get it in your head, but until you actually like see it, it doesn't click the exact same way. And also, like, what do you do with that hash after? You know, in a purple team, you can kind of like demo all that and show them. So it's really impactful to have like a real world scenario for that kind of thing, and you could see like why the firewall misconfiguration matters and what it could lead to potentially. So yeah, that happened quite a bit of time where they thought like this thing was on, or this firewall was configured a certain way, and it turned out it wasn't. But you know, that's the point of it all. That's why you have to like. That's the atomic red team. That's why it exists, right? You have to validate, and keep validating.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it, right? Like, I expect data source to be collected from X and Y. Like, does it actually do that? And of course, there's been like the evolution over the years of now getting to more like threat emulation, specific TTPs, things like atomic test harnesses, which are really going to the depths of detection and log validation. So I think it comes a long way and helps kind of bridge that gap of, okay, can we afford a purple team every month out of the year? Like, probably not. Can I get it maybe once a year, or even some companies potentially do it like once a quarter? But for other orgs, they kind of need that gap in between and figuring out like, okay, like how do I do it? And kind of taking some of those things like, okay, we fixed it on the purple team. Like, now 3 months down the road, did we do anything that potentially changed it and then could run potential like atomics? And so I think there's like kind of that bridging the gap, and again, going from like the walk, crawl, run aspect, like how does an org go from that walk into crawl, you know, or crawling into walking and then into running? I think that's sometimes missing in some capacities of like, how do we go and how do we know we're ready to go from each phase to the next, and like what's that potential bridge? And so hopefully we try and answer some of those points, or give some guiding ideas of how do you think you're ready. And so I think it's kind of like where we try and like answer some of those.
Yeah, for sure.
Or at least can help answer it. Is it taking down industries? Probably not. But is it helping gauge them? Sure. But I think we should jump into kind of the more purple teaming aspect. Like we touched on, specifically in our case of Gootloader, like we touched on like kind of how we should think about it, kind of what is purple teaming, but like now how do we track it? So I think you can, Anton, dig into like a cool tool, kind of show like, okay, you know, to the point, we expect data sources or tools XYZ to work, and so we can kind of use this, and also touch on how Atomic can bridge the gap with this as well. So I think we should jump in. Pretty excited for this one.
Yeah, for sure. Let me share my screen out here. All right. Let's see.
Cool. I'll add it there.
So this is the report that we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks, the Mandiant Goot report. And what I did is just took this narrative here, and shout out to Mandiant for providing this just like a clear narrative of like the attack path. And I used a tool called Vectr to map it out. And shout out to the Vectr team. Vectr is like a free tool for the community that it's a purple teaming tool, but you can I'll hopefully show you the features of it and stuff like that. That it's really flexible of what you can do with it. So don't think that just because you're not doing like professional purple teaming that you can't use the tool. It's just like one command to run it. It's all Dockerized. It's super easy to set up and stuff. And it also supports SSO. So if you're at an organization with strict authentication standards and all that, you can tie it in with Google and all that good stuff. So the overall like structure in Vectr, and I'll make the screen a little bigger so folks can see. There's a database, which is I think like the base component of it, and you can have multiple databases in there. And they've added this Vectr intro tour database. So if you're new to Vectr and you want to tinker around with it, take a look at this database. It'll kind of show you what Vectr is capable of. But I just made my own Atomics on a Friday, and then within the database kind of sits an assessment, and the assessment is your purple team assessment. And you can organize this how you wish. And I just have an assessment called Goot Loader, and then within that assessment, it's just Goot Loader TTPs is the campaign that sits underneath that assessment, and the assessment sits underneath the database. So you can break down these campaigns by whatever category you want. You can do like initial access campaign, and then execution campaign, credential dumping campaign, what have you. But I just shoved all the Goot Loader TTPs into this one campaign called Goot Loader TTPs, and you can see that Vectr kind of generates this cool graph for you. This is the escalation path that is built off these test cases that you put into Vectr, and Vectr will kind of like automatically organize it by the MITRE categories, and you can export it into a PNG and stuff like that. It also gives you a timeline here. So if you're doing a purple team where you're focused on timing and measuring like how fast an alert comes or doesn't come, or how fast it takes to respond to something, all that can be tracked in Vectr. So all I did is put the Goot Loader TTPs that are here, and I just put them into Vectr. And when you click into them, there's a whole kind of world of options. It's kind of overwhelming at first. And what I'm demoing here is just scratching the surface of Vectr functionality. It's really like a really cool tool that you can dig into and add your own kind of like notes and all that. You can also add like custom metadata and go kind of nuts with it. It also has like a really rich API. So if you're API inclined, you can get data in and out of Vectr that way too, which is really neat. So there's Vectr, like this is the window for the test case, and you can kind of cycle through them with these arrows here. And kind of as you go through your test cases, you can mark them up with different aspects. So you can see like this test case was completed. If for some reason you tried to do a test case and something broke, you can set it to abandoned or pause it or in progress and stuff like that. And as you change all this, these times kind of start and stop with you, but you can click into them too and kind of edit your own timeline for which team did what at what point. And then I'll show you in a second how the reporting aspect looks like. But what I have here is just I think this test case is the W script reaching out to a domain, right? Which is I categorize it as command and control. You can probably pick other categories that might fit. But here you can add a description. And what's cool with Vectr is that this is all markdown. So you can just do like title, of course I can't type. And then if you click view, it'll format it as markdown for you. So if you want to put like code snippets and stuff like that in here, you can do that. But there's this window is just for description, and what I use description for is kind of outlining like the questions that we want answered for this technique. So I have like two questions. Like, can we see the W script of PowerShell chain followed by a call out? So this for a purple team test, this tells you like, can I see like a process chain combined with a network event? In a lot of cases, those two things are kind of like disjointed, and some customers have trouble linking a particular process event to a network event. If you have Sysmon, you're lucky you have a GUID, so you can just use that. But some events don't have it. And then the second question, like, can we? Oh, sorry.
Cool.
Yeah,
I was just gonna say it's very neat, kind of detailed here.
Yeah, Vectr's amazing, and that's the thing. Like the way I'm showing it is just my personal way of using it. You can put whatever you want in these descriptions, or put them in different boxes. The world's your oyster, so to speak. The second question, I guess, like, can we track down a network event and tie that to a particular process? I think this is one of those like really interesting purple team exercise that sounds easy, right? You think like, yeah, of course I can, but when you actually like dig into your data and you have like 1 million PowerShell events, and like Windows is updating and doing its thing, and like Office click to run is there, and Teams is doing its thing, it might be a little bit hard to disentangle that. So that's what I use this description for. Yeah.
Under the blue team details there, that detecting blue tool, is that like a way to track how it was detected, more or less?
Yeah. So let's say like this is actually a good example. So this within the blue team details box, there's the outcome section, and in the outcome you can click different outcomes. So you can say like TBD. We don't know the alert, kind of like where the data for the alert went to a black hole somewhere, and we don't know where it went. So you can set it to TBD. If the EDR just denies you right off the bat, you can click blocked or alerted, and then you can click even the priority of that alert. Some organizations have different processes for their alerting. So like a low priority would go to like a different queue. So depending on your organization, this priority may or may not matter, but Vectr gives you the ability to track it. And then under the detecting blue team tools, so let's say like for this test case, we ran it. We ran this atomic that we have here linked, and we ran it, and our SIM or whatever tool alerted you with a high priority, and then you can pick which tool it was, and you can even add your own tools. So if you're using a tool that isn't on here, you can add it. So in this case, like, I don't know, let's say CrowdStrike blocked it, and then that gets put into the detecting blue team tools. And you can also add outcome notes here. So you could say like EDR block this right away, or whatever have you, right? Or you can even add like a timeline or narrative, whatever have you. But then under that is tags, and I think tags are my favorite feature in Vectr. It comes with a couple built-in tags here, but you can add your own tag, right? And you can choose a color, or you can say something like double check this. And when you click apply, it just adds the tag to your test case here. So if you have like a couple test cases that might have been like blocked, but maybe not on a variation or something like that, you can add a specific tag that says, I tried a variation of this and it wasn't blocked, or I tried this particular variation that was blocked. You can track it that way. You can even add, I don't have it set up here, but you can even add Sigma rules to the test cases, as well as like evidence files. So you can actually upload like log files and stuff like that. And I think before we went live, we were talking about how I think Kerry Roberts has a custom logger for Red Canary test cases that output a JSON file that you can input into Vectr. So you can use it from like multiple angles, right? You can like plan your stuff first in Vectr and then do your executions, or you can kind of like do your executions and then add that log into Vectr, or a combination of both. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to fill that in. So there's using the invoke atomic red team PowerShell executor, there's a parameter for, I think it's called attire, ATTIRE. Everything uppercase except for the I. And I actually think it was actually written by the security risk advisors, the team that makes Vectr, actually wrote that in that component, and exactly that. So when you're running atomics, you can say, hey, go log this, and pass the attire parameter, and it'll dump that JSON, then you can import it into here. So when you have like a list of atomics for like an emulation plan using this, like I could log all those, put these in here, and then to your point, like come in and say, okay, like I blocked this, I alerted on that, I didn't see this, I got to go figure that out. And it makes it really interesting. And I think even just the basic of like, did I see it? Did I log it? Right? Did I log it? Did I alert on it? Did I block it? Or do I have nothing? And I think a couple weeks ago, Keith McCammon from Red Canary put out a very simple like spreadsheet of like, here's an atomic test, what happened, right? And then like a couple other fields of like a very simplistic, like I ran a test, this thing occurred, and then just kind of gives you the ability to like step through in a simplistic manner. And it's kind of like, again, going from the crawl, walk, run aspect, like that's a crawl, like we can then go to this, which is kind of more like the walk, run balance, but to really help identify like where this are at. So it's like super cool.
Yeah.
Within the operator guidance, like, can you jump into that a little bit? Like, what is that? Like, what can we do there?
Yeah, this is for like what the test case, like what do you do to execute this? So like the procedural stuff, like how did we make this chain appear, or like what domain did we call out to? So for this case, I just linked an atomic test in here, but you can link, like I said, this is like a markdown editor, so you can put in like code for like each command line that you need to run and all that. And I haven't played with this feature in Vectr too much, but you can even build your own agent that'll actually like execute the test cases for you. And here on the left, you could add your different sources and targets, so you don't get confused about like where the attack came from and kind of where it went, sort of thing. And all these boxes too, like the red team and the blue team boxes up here, they have their own properties and their own like metadata in them. So you can do a whole bunch of interesting stuff with Vectr that I don't know how to use yet, to be honest. But this is the high level overview of Vectr and how it works at the basic level. You can get really advanced with it. The cool part about it, and this is only one like menu within Vectr that I just showed to give you an idea of like how powerful it can become. So once you have like your test cases executed, so let's say like this malicious zip file is saved to the user's download folder. Let's say we completed this test, this one got blocked, and we got an alert. And then the last test here, we completed this test. This is the zip file dropping the JS file. And let's say this one, there was no outcome. Like we didn't get a log for it. So once we're done here, we can see like each test case has its own like status and outcome and tags. And you can even sort by these. So if you just want to see the double check this tag, you can just click that and it'll just show you the one that you have. But the cooler feature, let's say like you did this Goots loader assessment and you're happy with it and you want to, show your boss, hey, here's the report. If you go to the reporting tab here, it'll actually spit out a really cool graph for you to show you exactly what was alerted, what was blocked, how this happened. And the more you fill out in that assessment screen, the richer the reporting is. If you scroll down, it'll break it down by like tactic or phase. And this gets really cool if you do these over time, because you could even report on trending. So you can see like, how are we trending on execution? Are we going up? Are we detecting more? Are we detecting less? And these are metrics that like InfoSec leaders crave, right? Everyone wants like accurate like InfoSec detection metrics, and they're tricky to do, right? Because it's also like complicated and wishy-washy, but the Vectr really helps you here. And the cool part too is that let's say up here you have like a bunch of campaigns and a bunch of assessments. You can pick which ones get rolled into the metrics, and Vectr kind of like does that all for you. You don't have to mess with anything. And this is just one of the reporting screens. There's a whole bunch. You can go into test case drill down, export this by CSV. You can filter by tags. This is one of my favorites, the heat map. This just gives you a MITRE heat map. By default, it's a little bit hard to read, but if you click this no test coverage filter, it'll just get rid of the stuff that doesn't have a test case assigned to it. And you can even export this into an attack navigator layer.
Of course.
Yeah, right. So you can you can really live in MITRE attack with Vectr and just like be the happiest individual. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Seeing we don't have coverage for everything, Anton.
I know, right?
It's problematic.
Yes, my KPIs for this year are very bad.
There's plenty of time to run all. I think Carrie posted a thing. We have 1,800 atomics across like four big components.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
We're getting there. We'll have coverage for everything, and then you can truly hit the bingo check mark.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other cool thing that Vectr could do is in this use case probably isn't a great example because we don't have a lot of tools in here, but a lot of the times the customers or businesses want to know like how are my tools doing, like which tool is doing the most kind of work, and Vectr could help you here. If you go to toolset summary, it'll tell you which tool detected what at what phase. So you can see like here Falcon is obviously that's the only one we picked, so that's up here. But if you had more tools, right, you have your proxy involved, you have your AV, you have your EDR, this will give you a nice chart as to like what's involved where. And there's a whole bunch of other reporting options in here that are interesting too. The scorecard is a favorite because this tells you what the percentage is of stuff that you detected or alerted on versus stuff that you didn't. And it breaks this down into phases too. So like really, really awesome metrics that if you're kind of like really good at keeping up with Vectr and like just being like disciplined about putting in your stats and all that, it'll give you really good metrics. And there's like a timeline too. So if you're tracking like what happened when, this is really good for that. I think there's an overview for like the entire campaign as well. And again, all this is like exportable, API-able and stuff. So really, really awesome tool.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. I was just kind of like thinking about how like if you take like what Harrison shared on the CTI side and like you kind of fill this in, and then like blue comes in and riddles their pieces, red riddles their pieces. Like it's a pretty powerful like resource to have for like an organization here.
Yeah, it's like good. Like if you're kind of like just starting out and you feel overwhelmed by it, it's understandable because it's overwhelming. There's a lot of like buttons and options, and like I find something new about it every time. But I find that it's a good like glue to stitch together, because if you're thinking about like doing a purple team exercise, the actual like running the atomics, like you guys made that easy. But like how do you track that, and what do you do after the fact is a bit of like an unknown. And that might be, for some people, that might be the reason why they don't want to do this kind of stuff, because they're overwhelmed with the tracking part of it and with the metrics part of it, and they don't want to juggle around like a spreadsheet or whatever. So this tool is like really good for that kind of thing. So yeah, big shout out to the SRA team for keeping it free and putting in hours and all that, developing it.
Yeah, I didn't realize that was just on their website. They actually have like a couple other tools that I've never come across that sound really interesting. But this, I've been digging into this a lot over probably the past year, and this is probably one of my favorite tools from like exactly to your point. Like I run a test. How can I just make sure like, and again, even taking up the part I don't want to live in Excel, but I want something that kind of does some of the magic for me in a very simplistic, even here, right? This is very, very simple of, here's a test, here's the technique, here's the thing I think should do the job of whatever it is, block, detect, alert, log, and then just tell me where I'm at, and I can kind of like then start to piggyback and go from there.
Yeah, it gets really like I was saying, like when you as you do more of these and you do them over time and you track them the same way, and you really get some interesting metrics as to what tool does the most for you and where your weaker areas are. When I was doing this with clients professionally and some had Sysmon, uh, eventually over time, you would see Sysmon be like heads and tails above EDR, proxy, all this other stuff in terms of like detecting, which is really interesting. I found anyways, and I found that to be pretty consistent. And I guess that's not like I don't want to generalize it to be like if you have Sysmon, it'll alert on everything and you have coverage for everything. But like that's why I harped on it so much in my career and over the years, that because I've seen it work personally. When I was using it individually and when I work with clients who had it, I saw like empirically that it covered more execution test cases than other tools did. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I know. Kind of looking at this, and it's like, it's almost I'd have to peruse the website, but this seems like a great opportunity for like a like a SaaS version or something, some kind of supported online, like where folks don't have to build it and like they just like start using it. Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah, it's awesome. And like I said, super easy to set up. There's a Docker file. And even when you upgrade it, all you have to do is like open the Docker file, change the version number, and Docker compose down and then up, and then you're good to go. It's a really sweet tool.
I think I haven't spun this up like 10 times because I keep forgetting or like blowing away the VM that holds it. And I was like, oh, that had Vectr on it. And I lost a whole bunch of stuff. And then I'm back up and running in 5 minutes. So I can attest that it is really probably one of the most simplistic installs and usage of getting this up and running.
Yeah, just make sure to
like
back up the databases when you're doing it.
Oh, I
just
have.
a quick tip for everyone. Yeah. Back up
home
your
database.
Backups.
Backups.
Is there a way to like is there a way to export like this bootloader piece and like or this Atomic on Friday piece? Like is there like if I wanted to share this with other people, is there an option to like export? Is it like database or?
Yeah, I think you can download a report and then you could actually do like a CSV dump of the database.
Oh, okay.
I don't know exactly how that looks when you go to import it back, but there's got to be ways to do it. Yeah, in the Docker file that mounts a path with a database, you can do it that way too.
Okay.
It's not something I've done a whole lot of, but yeah, it should be possible. And I guess the last resort, if you can't share the actual vector piece, you can share the heat map here, the MITRE one.
Yeah, we'll get this out so that way people can we'll have a repo of all the resources associated for everything that we've been doing the past few weeks. We'll congregate all of that, have it in a central repository in our GitHub repo. We'll have the vector stuff. We'll also convert it to like a very, again, simplistic CSV. So if you just want to point to like, test kit, atomic test number X, go run it and then track it. Like we'll have very simplistic approaches. So that way get a little bit of everything. But I think this is a really good place to at least even just get started of like, okay, I'm just going to pick a couple TTPs and let it rip. Even if you start with like 2 or 3, that's at least you're getting going. Like that's the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, once you kind of get started with this and you get comfortable with like executing and tracking and all that, you really start to, it's a really powerful dynamic. I always found like to be able to like run something of your own in your own environment and then be able to like check the logs for that and be able to like repeat that and iterate on it. It's a really great way to like test your tools and validate your alerting and all that good stuff. Because otherwise, like, how would you do it, right? Like, how would you, like, what would you do, right? I know, like, I think it was Chris Sanders who tweeted a couple of years ago, like, the whole SOC analyst dilemma of staring at a blank search bar, and that always stuck with me because, like, that's a great point. Like, how do you start? What do you do? And this is a great way to start. Like, run who am I, and see if you can find that. Then do IP config and see if you can find that, and then go from there. And then you'll see how quickly it'll kind of like snowball, and before you know it, you'll be Jupyter notebooking and running attacks and all this good stuff. So yeah, it's an interesting journey for sure.
I think that's a good topic. Is like sometimes even when I'm asked a question of like, did thing occur? Like, okay, well, like, what's the fundamental ask to your point? Like, okay, I ran ipconfig, and I think that should show up in my EDR data. Like, I think sometimes people think that some of these queries that we have to write for whether it's an EDR or in our SIMs, that has to be like complex and very, well formed, like wildcards. Slap it in there. If you have no idea, like that's okay. Like just slap in those wildcards, let it rip, figure out those things, and then you start to build it over time. And then as you're trying to tune and like get more detailed of what it is, then that's how they kind of build out. So like start simple and then build off of that versus thinking I gotta have, you look at some of these things that people write that, in GitHubs for like EDRs, like KQL stuff, and you look at it, you're like, it's 20 lines long, it's complex, you're like, what is all this stuff doing? When in reality, you could start with a simple thing, just wildcard it all and see what happens.
Yeah, and that'll give you an idea of like, where like the fields are and all that, and what contains what for sure. Yeah, definitely.
You even think like, what are the fields? Like, you think about like the event schemas that EDRs have. Like, there's event schemas that I've been working with this EDR for like 5 years now, and I haven't even scratched the surface of understanding all of them. So like, even when I do the wildcard search and it pops up in this thing, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting event schema or source, and then I go look at what it is and how it's collected or how it's collecting it and what gets populated. Like, that gets really interesting. So there is some benefit of just slapping the wildcard and let it rip, especially in your sims.
Yeah, definitely agree.
That's my favorite.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
Don't use any of my searches. If I give you a search, don't ever put that in production because it's like triple wildcards everywhere. It's gonna, the bills are gonna go through the roof.
You gotta start somewhere, right? I mean, we shouldn't be like shaming people for their query etiquette or whatever, Like, I've done plenty of like bad practice searches in my career.
Query hygiene.
Yeah, query hygiene.
I mean, Splunk's running as root in my home lab right now. Like,
yeah, why not? Why not?
You're gonna tell me that's wrong?
Yeah. No,
is it wrong? Yeah. Yes. Is it production? No. So I don't care. But,
yeah. I mean, that's
sure, production.
If there's any like takeaway here, it's that the bar for purple teaming, at least in my opinion, is very low. Meaning that don't be afraid to do it. And that's not to say like the bar for like purple teaming generally is low. It just means that like, just don't be afraid to jump in, right? Like we just talked about, like who am I is a great purple team test case to start with. I don't see anything wrong with that. And you'll be advanced in no time.
I mean, I just wrote an atomic and had it merged in last night. That was a variance of who am I, realizing like as simple as who am I to a redirect of a file, like that test didn't exist, but it's still interesting because I'm looking for two things. One, the process execution, and two, the file write associated with it. Not necessarily, and those two things are two different data sources. Even though I may expect EDR to be the thing that catches both of it, I expect two different things to occur. So even simplistic things like that, like it works.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. And then that's what like helps you like get your feet out from under you, right? Like that's that helps you get the foundation, and then from there you understand data sources, you understand the data pipeline, you understand like the fields, the queries, and all that. So it becomes easier to build off of.
Yeah. Say if it gets results, who cares how you got there? And then over time you build the skills and knowledge and figure it out. But if you start out and you solve something like, hey, realize we don't have the ability to detect or our prevention tools aren't working like we should, like congrats. Like you identified a problem and now can go work towards a solution. So if that's what happens, then congrats. You're already on the path to success.
Yep. And you're a purple teamer. Feel free to add that to your title.
That's for everybody. Yeah, add it to your add to your resume.
Yep.
Get your badge. Right. Something I was just thinking about was like even with like any kind of emulation plans that you run, it seems like Vectr is a really sweet way to track something large if you're running a bunch of them at once and you kind of wanted to go back and track that. I don't know, kind of a neat process.
Yeah. Vector's like I said, it's like the kind of like the glue that ties together your testing, your tracking, your metrics. It kind of like sits in between all that, acting as like the organizational tool for it. But I mean, you don't have to use it that way. You can use it strictly as like a repository for your data, for your logging and all that. You can do it that way too. There's no like, I mean, the folks at SRA might disagree, but I don't think there's any wrong way of using it. Like as long as you're using it and tracking, I think you're good to go.
I think like
Awesome.
I'm giving a talk on Atomic Red Team for like incident response training. Was it designed for it? No. But can it be used for it? Yeah. Am I probably stretching a little bit? Maybe. But does it solve problems? Sure. So like in the case of like, hey, maybe it wasn't initially designed for it, but it could fill this kind of need. Like, yeah, go for it. I mean, who's going to tell you no, especially if it's getting results? Like, if it gets results, you can't deny it. Like,
Yep.
Somebody can tell you like, no, that's wrong, but who cares? Like, you're winning potentially. Like, go for it.
Yeah. As long as you're like pushing that needle forward at your organization or for your clients or customers or what have you, like the way that's done. I mean, like I don't. To me, there's very little things that you can do that I'd be like, no, this is like completely wrong. Like obviously if you're being like negligent or something like that, that's a different case. But if you're like not using Vector exactly the right way, like no, I'm not gonna like show up to your house and tell you like, hey, don't use Vector like this, right? So yeah, just play around with it, have fun, tear down the container if you're stuck, build it back up. So that's what it's there for.
Or delete the VM and rebuild it.
Or that. Yeah. That's definitely a good approach too. Yeah.
I always forget snapshots.
Yeah.
I spend way too much time building it and then snapshot it like way later than I should have. And then I'm like, all right, well, here's 2 hours coming back of building a VM and installing like 30 tools. Like Misp I used to build by hand all the time. It was awful.
But that's Docker. Like I had deleted like 5 containers and they're all randomly generated named, and like I don't know, like they're all gonna die today, and ends up being the important ones.
Yeah, that's the funny thing too. Like the Vector that I was just showing was running on my machine back there in a VM, but in a container too, where I guess I didn't really need to create a special VM for it. I could have just ran it in Docker, but that's the old school mentality is still there, I guess. Yeah.
So can I put like a container in a container that's on a VM that's on like bare metal?
I think you can. I think there's Docker and Docker. Yeah, I believe that's possible. I don't know why you would do it. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm waiting for Vector to get Kubernetes as well, because it's a Docker compose file, which I think is close to a YAML Kubernetes thing. So that would be interesting too, to your Vector as a SaaS product point. That'd be interesting. That'd be an interesting project for someone to turn Vector into a Kubernetes deployment. So if anyone out there wants to do that, it's a cool project.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all these open source tools that can help out and just get started. Cool. So it's been awesome. Really appreciate you, especially taking time with the Vector and digging into it and really showing off the capabilities of it. So like we mentioned, we'll take the Vector stuff. We'll get that with our notes. We'll actually create a CSV. And we're going to rip these atomics. We're going to ship them downrange. And then next week, we're going to then look at like, cool, we ran the test. Like now what? Like that's the other component, right? So it's not just running the test, but then which we touched on too, was like, did we alert on it? Did we detect on it? Right. So then looking at our tools. So that's where Na's going to help us out next week of like, okay, cool. Let's say we assumed that we had no detections, but we have ample data sources. Like now, how do we go build detections and analytics to actually alert us to some potential activity? So it's going to be really cool to jump into there. I'm really excited for that and kind of dig more into the detection engineering side. But it's always nice to again, apply different verticals to kind of the similar problem of taking CTI, making it applicable from a purple teaming, and then figure out like, cool, we have gaps. Like now, how do we go fill those gaps? Like that's kind of the last component of this whole series. So sad it's coming to an end, but it's been a blast and a lot of good lessons learned.
Yeah.
And insights shared.
Yeah,
it's thanks for
been neat.
letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you again for joining and sharing your insights and your background. Like, it's been super awesome.
My pleasure. I was just laughing at the meme on the right there.
It's coming as soon as we wrap. Like, that's the next thing we're planning is OST charity debate. It's coming.
Oof. I hope that makes a lot of money. I hope that energy gets channeled into something positive. That's my wish.
We're gonna go big with this one.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I think there's gonna be some.
Have two.
Yeah,
we decided there's gonna be two. One for OST itself, and then the other is a debate on C2 frameworks. So there's ideas for both, and some interested parties for both. So we'll be planning that and getting something going. So be on the lookout for that soon. But first,
it's gonna be
we focus
a series that doesn't end with those two debates. Those are so deep calls. That's awesome.
I feel like as part of it, we should probably put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, and then at the same time, then build a new debate that really gets going.
I don't know if the industry could handle another one. The OST one's already
it's been a years-long battle.
Yeah, right. And it feels like it's like a chart that ebbs and flows, where the debate heats up and
Yep.
But I feel like it's time for something new. But what is that new thing? No idea. But I'm really interested, and hopefully somebody gets something good, because I love watching the Twitter feeds and beefs that occurred. Like, it's great. Huge fan of it. Friday night doom scrolling. I'm here for it.
And now with the new Twitter, people are writing the huge page-long tweets. So
10,000 character essay, MLA format.
I like it. I don't know. I like reading, and so it's fun for me. But yeah, it's definitely a meaty topic, that's for sure. I'm glad I was here for the purple team, not the OST debates. So thank you for that.
We'll bring you back in for that one too.
Yeah,
oh,
you come on down.
Thanks. Yeah.
Anton's fully regretting everything now.
I know, he's like, oh crap, I have to debate this now.
I think I gave my opinion on it. I think the week before that I was in, I don't know, I sit in the middle of that all. I don't know. I don't like conflict either, so I don't really get into the heated back and forth. But I think both sides have interesting points. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting series for sure. Yeah.
I think I want the extreme for both sides. That's what I'm.
Oh yeah.
I'm kind of hoping we can get them in there and just. Yeah, I want to see. I want to get heated. I want
to run it like a high school debate almost. I want a panel of judges. I want a moderator, and then things go and you get 2 minutes. 2 minutes, your mic's getting cut, and then we go on to the next one. Really do it. Yeah. But I also like the free form aspect of it, because that's kind of cool. So we'll toss around ideas and get inputs from people, and it's gonna be fun. I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, tuning into that one for sure.
Oh yeah, but awesome. Yeah. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll be back next week, 24th. 1300 EST, 1700 UTC. Don't forget those time zone changes that occurred that I'm still battling. I'm just hoping that we just stick to one time zone. Hopefully that passes this year. I'm not optimistic that it will, but one day, hopefully it will, and we just stick with one and never do this again.
Yeah. Thank you, Anton.
Awesome.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for spending the time here
helping
us.
Yeah, thanks everyone who tuned in. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.